Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Shooting Straight, Living Life in Truth. I'm Charles, your host for the evening, and tonight we are going. There we go. And tonight we're going to continue our topic of my basic training experience from last week. The reason I'm doing that is because I didn't have enough time to quite go over everything I wanted to last week. So we're going to hit some of the things that I missed last week and then continue on with some things that happened later in basic training. But without further ado, let's get a word from our sponsor.
Are you twisted enough for Twisted Minds escape rooms? Then check us out at twistedminds.com and book an adventure today. You can choose between Camp Calico or the mysteries of Vanished. How about travel back in time to 1840s California and visit Digger's General Store? Or get ready, coming late spring, early summer 2021, a little bit of mayhem at Twisted Minds escape rooms in Palm Coast. Check us out at twistedminds.com or give us a call at 888-92-TWIST. We'll be waiting.
Welcome back. Again, as always, if you're ever in Palm Coast, make sure to check out Twisted Minds escape rooms. They're the best escape room in Northeast Florida and possibly even in the state. But if you ever get down there, make sure you check them out. Make sure you book yourself a room, take advantage of it. The staff is awesome, the rooms are incredible, and they spared no thought in putting those things together. You will absolutely enjoy yourself. So, with that said, let's move on with today's topic. First, I want to refresh your memory just a little bit about basic training and the fact that when I went through, there were three phases. You had a red phase, a white phase, and a blue phase. And if you notice, the first 3 weeks is basically the red phase. That's where you do most of your classroom stuff. Basically learning about the things that you're going to do physically during white week and blue week and a lot of the basics type stuff. But throughout the whole process, there are certain things that they're constantly hounding and harping on and getting you to remember and memorize. And that's things like your warrior's creed, your soldier's creed, the ethos, your oh geez, my mind is drawing a blank here. But anyway, there's a bunch of stuff like that. Just I would call it trivia, but the reality is it's a development of a mindset, and that's why they go through it the entire process until you get to a point where you can recite it at will on command. And then, like I said, you have your different phases. Red phase is your basic stuff, your first aid training, your classroom stuff, procedures, kind of like your syllabus type work, essentially. And then you move into white phase, which starts going over some of the stuff that you've already done, but now you're doing it in a physical form, because the Army has this teaching concept of see one, teach one, or see one, do one, and teach one. Basically meaning they show you one time how to do something, and then you do it yourself, and then the next time that you do it, you're going to be teaching somebody. And it is a very effective way of getting things to stick. So with that said, again, like I said last week, the drill sergeants, pretty much anytime you see a drill sergeant, you can pretty much expect to see this face or something similar to it, just because that's what basic training is like. It's always like that from the minute they step on the bus all the way through basically to the end. But however, caveat to that, once you get into blue phase, you've completed all your training, you've essentially met all the requirements and met all the standards, and they're pretty confident that you're going to graduate. They kind of ease up a little bit, but but you will still see that face, especially if you screw up. If you mess something up, you will see that face. You will get that round brown bumping you right in the forehead, making you feel like, you got bricks smacking you in the face. But hey, that by the time you get to blue phase, if you're messing up, you got a serious problem. By the time you're in blue phase, you shouldn't be messing up. Everything should be muscle memory and just habitual at that point. So, with that said, last week I talked a little bit about the first aid training and what that was like inside the classroom. But there's another part to first aid training that can't be done in the classroom because, quite frankly, it's the physical side of things. That's where you're going out and you're actually applying field dressings, applying tourniquets, and things like that in a field environment where they do things like moulage, which moulage is merely people doing the special effects makeup to make it look like the person actually has the injury that you're trying to treat. And in the process of doing all of that, you will have to actually practice and implement what's known as your buddy carry scenarios. That's when you're trying to bring somebody out of battle that's wounded. This particular one you see on your screen is known as the fireman's carry, and it is the most commonly used one out of all of them because it's actually the simplest. It requires the fewest amount of people to get someone off the battlefield. And in reality, it's the fastest way to get somebody off the battlefield. So if you can imagine wearing your combat gear, which basically equates to an additional 20 to 30 pounds when you have your LBEs, your protective mask and all that kind of stuff sitting on you with the magazines and all of that. So you're looking at about 10, 20, maybe 30 pounds worth of stuff added onto your body, especially if you have the flak vest on and you're wearing your helmet and whatnot, which, as you can see, this gentleman's wearing the Kevlar helmet. So you got all that stuff on you, and you're trying to carry someone else who has probably anywhere from 170 to 230 pounds worth of body weight themselves, which essentially is dead weight because they're not moving. They're limp as a noodle. So you're literally holding on to their leg and their arm to keep them on your shoulders, and you are basically moving as fast as you can to get off the battlefield. Now, if you can imagine trying to do something like that, that is not easy. It will physically wear you out. I know when I went through my expert field medical badge attempts, we had to do this, and at one time we ended up having to carry out, I think it was 6 patients. And I tell you what, by the time that 6th one was done, you were wore out. I mean, and you were sweating really bad. Now, you see the uniform there. So you got a t-shirt on, then you got your overshirt on. And of course you got your underwear and pants on. And you're sweating so bad that it's literally dripping off of your uniform. Not just dripping off of your bare exposed skin, but dripping out of your uniform. You're sweating so bad trying to carry these guys. And if you were fortunate and you were a male and you got to carry a female, which back then that didn't happen because we all did the training at different times in different places because we weren't allowed to mix back then. But if you were fortunate enough, you got to carry a female, and well, that was a whole lot easier, just obviously because of body weight. But anyway, that's the fireman's carry. Then we also had what was known as the sling carry, the drag carry, and there was actually a couple different versions of the drag carry. But the hardest one of those was essentially you were in a push-up position, sprawled eagle, over the top of your casualty, and you would take their arms and drape them around your neck while they were laying on their back, and they would have to hang on, or you would strap something around underneath their back and up underneath their armpits, and then tie that around your neck if they were unable to hold on. And then you would be basically crawling out on all fours, trying to drag them out of the battle zone. That was even harder than the fireman's carry, and it takes a whole lot longer to do. So needless to say, nobody really did that too much. But we still had to practice it. We still had to know how to do it, and we still had to be efficient with it. So there was a lot of things like that that we did, and I think there was like 7 or 8 different carries that we would train on and that we would do on a regular basis. And I tell you what, by the time you got to doing those things, you were thankful for all the PT that you were doing, because it prepped you for it. But nevertheless, even with all that PT, it was still tough. Now later on in my career, as I got more physically fit and even stronger, it didn't bother me as much, and I was able to do more of it, which was fortunate because once I became a medic, I mean, that was my job. And that came in handy quite a bit, especially when you get to your first duty assignment and you're working in an ambulance section, and you're finding yourself having to pick up, you know, 230, 250, 280, 300-pound people on a gurney with medical equipment on top of it. So you're literally lifting somewhere in the neighborhood of, 400 to 500 pounds, trying to lift that up and get this patient in the back of an ambulance. So that was always fun. But needless to say, being physically fit as a medic is extremely important. Without being physically fit, you just can't do that job. There's just no way. I mean, you have to be physically fit to be an infantryman, and that's no joke in and of itself. But when you throw on top of being an infantryman, also being a medic, and the things that you end up having to do in addition to the infantry duties, you better be in tip-top shape, and you better be ready for it, because people's lives are depending on you succeeding at what you do. And that's just something else. So we'll move on to the next one. Danielle, I forget what that next photo is, so if you would just go ahead and put that up for me. Ah, yes, the gas chamber. The memories from the gas chamber. Oh, my Lord. Of all the things in the military, this is one thing I do not miss. I do not miss this place at all. I'm telling you, at all. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced or had CS gas used on you, i.e., riot control gas. But this happened to us at least twice a year, where we would go to the gas chamber in order to stay proficient with our MBC stuff. And when I say MBC stuff, I'm talking nuclear, biological, chemical warfare. That's what it was called when I was in. And what you see these guys wearing right now is what would be known as basically MOP level 2, because they've got, well, actually they're not wearing any of their MOP gear, but the gentleman in the middle there that looks like he's putting something on a burner, he's actually wearing a different kind of MOP top, which MOP basically means mission-oriented protective posture. And that's all related to the MBC warfare stuff. Essentially, your MOP level 4 is where you have your mask, You have a chemical suit top, a chemical suit set of pants. You've got rubber gloves, and then you've also got rubber boots that fit on over the top of your regular boots. And there's a particular way that you have to put that stuff on in a particular order, and you have a certain amount of time in order to put it on. In order to qualify and get a passing score or passing grade on MVC training, you have to be able to go from mop 0 to mop level 4 in 8 minutes or less. Now, you think that may be a long time, and technically it is, but when you're trying to put things on and you're trying to put them on in a specific order, snap things in a specific order, tie things in a specific order, zip things in a specific order, and then, strap things down in a particular order, all while wearing a protective gas mask, it's not so easy. And that time can slip by really quick. But this gas chamber, getting back to that, what you see here, it's a little thick compared to what we started off with. And in basic training, they basically do one tablet that they put on these burners, and that'll fill the room with the CS gas. But it's not so thick that you can actually see any kind of smoke in the room. As a matter of fact, you can't see it at all. And you're in there dressed like these guys are, with just your battle dress uniform on and your protective mask on without a hood. And the reason for that is because they want you to have some exposed skin. And the reason they want you to have exposed skin is because whatever skin happens to be exposed to the CS gas will actually get this prickly burning type sensation in your skin. And that's, and when they notice that you start feeling that, that's when they go, okay, take your masks off. And then they tell you to take in a breath. And then they wait about 5 to 10 seconds. It's probably more like 5 seconds, but it feels like 30. Because that's when the CS starts taking effect on you. And that's when you start noticing that your eyes are watering, your nose starts running, and you start excessively salivating to the point that you start drooling. And when I say your nose starts running, I'm talking like, the infants that are like a constant faucet, just always running. That's what happens. And your skin is burning the whole time, and all this stuff is going on. And then they come up to you, and they look at you, and in my case, they go, "Private Sutton, who are you?" And then you have to recite your name. So you have to say rank, name, and service number, which I'm not going to recite to you because that's something you don't need to know. That's my business. But you go, Private Sutton, Charles, one each, and then you cite your service number. And then they would ask you, who's the President of the United States? And you would have to answer with the correct answer. Then they would say, who's the General of the Army? And you'd have to give the correct answer. And then they'd say, who's the Secretary of Defense? And you'd have to give a correct answer. And if you answered all of those questions correctly, and you recited your name and rank and service number correctly, then they would let you leave the room. And when you left the room, you had these instructions that when you got outside, as soon as you got outside the door, you had to put your arms out to your side like this and flap like a bird. Just flap like a bird, holding your protective mask in one hand while you do it. And they wouldn't let you wash off or anything like that until you were at least 50 yards away from the gas chamber. So you had to run like 50 yards to the next location, and then at that point, then you could take your canteens and start pouring the water onto your arms and onto that bare skin. And the reason that you would do that was because that would help actually wash the CS off of your skin, and it would stop the burning. It didn't do much to help with the runny eyes, the running nose, the drooling mouth, all that kind of stuff. But it did make you feel a lot better skin-wise. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to do something like that, But try to imagine your eyes are running, so they're all watered up and you can't really see anything. Everything's blurry. You're looking through water. Your nose is running so bad you can't breathe through it, so you're having to open your mouth to breathe through your mouth. And yet, your mouth is salivating so badly that you're drooling on yourself at the same time. And they're asking you, oh, and your skin is burning like fire at this point, like you've just been hit by a bed of fire ants. And they're asking you to recite your name, your rank, and your service number, and then answer these questions. And you're like, what on earth are you guys doing? Are you trying to torture me? you know, and it kind of feels like torture, but in reality, it's a specific training with a specific purpose, and I will get to that in a minute. Now, Danielle, if you'll put that picture back up again, in this photo of the gas chamber, you'll see there's like this light fog in the room. All right. Now, the last time I went through the gas chamber, where they well, I'll say this. The only time I ever went through the gas chamber where they were emphasizing the NBC training like extremely heavy was right before I was mobilized to go to Desert Storm when we were going to Iraq, and there was a fear that Saddam Hussein was going to use chemical weapons against us because he had already done so against the Iranians. So we were concerned that he might do that. So they were really pushing the NBC training during our build-up phase and our train-up phase for deployment. And the people there, oh my goodness. You walked into the room and they had two tablets on there, so they doubled up. And it was a little bit thicker than what you're seeing in this photo. Just a little bit. And then they had us take off our masks. Well, there was like 30 of us in the room. 15 of us dropped out at that point. And granted, I mean, they had to ask the questions and stuff before they could leave. But the drills, the NBC sergeants would sit there and watch everybody, and they would see who was being affected when, and then they would start asking those questions to let them out. And then the other of us that were still left, the 15 of us, the NBC sergeant turned around after letting the other 15 go and looked at us and looked at the other instructor and said, looks like we've got some folks that have built the tolerance up. Good for them. And threw a third tablet on the flame, on the cooker there. And we're like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go, guys. Watch out. And we're going along. And then 5 of us that were left started trying to reach up to their neck because they could feel it starting to burn in their neck. And so the NBC sergeant told them to take their mask off. And man, as soon as they took their mask off, they started coughing immediately. I mean, it was their eyes, their nose, their mouth. I mean, it was just like a faucet out onto the floor. It hit them so hard, so fast. And they asked them the questions. They let those 5 go. And he turned around and looked and he said, we still got 10 more guys left. We need some more. Threw on a 4th tablet. That was the thickest I've ever seen this stuff before. Guys, I'm telling you, it was so thick. I could barely see the NBC sergeant standing 5 feet away from me. It wasn't until he got up to about 3 feet from me that I could see more than just the silhouette of this guy. And he was a big dude. And I was just like, oh my God, what is going on? I've never seen this before. So I was a little concerned, but nevertheless, I wasn't feeling anything. There was no burning on my skin. None of the signs or the symptoms of anything that I was feeling. I was barely starting to feel something on my hands because they were exposed, and maybe a little bit right here, like on the front of my chest, where that was exposed. But it wasn't anything big. But I was starting to notice it, and I don't know, I'd say like 5 minutes went by, and finally, everybody else was done and had gone out, and there was three of us left standing there. And of the three of us, I ended up being the last one to actually indicate that I was feeling anything. And man, I tell you what, when I took that mask off and I took that first breath in, that stuff was so thick that immediately I could feel it burning my lungs. I was like, "Oh my God, this is a nightmare." That's all I was thinking. And then about that time, the NBC sergeant started talking to me, and I had to tune out what was happening with my body to include the watery eyes, the runny nose, the excessive saliva, and now I was really feeling the burn in my skin. And I had to tune all of that out to pay attention to what he was saying. And I recited my name, my rank, my service number, and then he started asking me different questions. And they weren't necessarily easy questions either. And but I knew the answers and I got them right. And he says, and I started to walk away, and he said, "Dude, I have never seen anybody withstand CS gas like you just did." And I said, "Well, I've been going through it for twice a year for the last 4 years. I'm sure I've built up some kind of tolerance to it." And he said, You have, that's for sure, but that's a good thing for you." And he said, "No, go ahead and get out of here. I'll talk to you about it afterwards." So you can go ahead and pull that down now. So when I got out, I got washed off, got the stuff off of my skin, got the skin to stop burning, and then it was about 10 minutes later that the runny nose stopped. And the NBC sergeant came up to me and started talking to me, and he asked me, he said, "Do you know why we got it so thick in there?" And I said, "No, but I'd sure like to know." And he said, "Well, with us about to be deployed to a zone where it's possible the chemical weapons and chemical warfare could be used against us, having a tolerance to the CS gas will help just a little bit to your benefit when it comes to certain chemical agents that could be used against us, but it's not going to prevent the chemical agents from doing what they do. But and having at least a little bit of a tolerance to this kind of stuff, it buys you some extra time to be able to get your mop gear on. And it also helps train you and keep you in a mindset where you can keep a focused, clear mind to perform the tasks that you need to perform in order to survive." I was like, "Well, that makes perfect sense." And so from that day forward, after experiencing those 4 tablets on the burner with the CS gas, from that day forward, I never questioned again the effectiveness of the mop gear, the mission-oriented protective posture gear. When I, yeah, go ahead and bring up that picture of mop 4, just so everybody can see it. So this is mop level 4. All right, you've got your Kevlar helmet covered with a chemical covering. You've got your protective mask on with the hood, which is all that rubber plastic looking stuff that's coming down onto the shoulders there, and you can see the straps coming underneath the armpits. And then you've got your mop top, the mop pants. Then you've got those rubber boots down below. All right, and then the rubber gloves on the hands. Now, the tape that you see wrapped around the wrist and the upper arm on there, and then also on the leg, that's not, it's tape, but it's not actually tape. It's actually what if I remember correctly, was M9 paper. And what M9 paper was chemical detection. So if any kind of liquid got on the suit or touched it, or say you brushed up against leaves as you're tromping through the woods or whatever, and there was chemical agents in the area, it would make the M9 paper change colors. And based on the colors, you could determine what kind of agent that it was. and therefore be able to turn around and warn everybody else behind you not to go into that area because it was chemically affected. But when you wear this stuff and you end up putting all your combat gear back on top of it, like your LBV and your weapon and a rucksack and everything else, oh my God. This thing is guaranteed to increase the temperature inside the suit, in other words, the temperature around your body, by at least 10 to 15 degrees. So if you're talking it's 90 degrees outside, inside that suit, you're talking it's 100 to 105 degrees. It will tear you up. Now imagine wearing that in the Saudi desert when it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Yeah, you're cooking. So you better be drinking water. And trying to drink water through those masks is no easy task. It's, oh. No, that's just a nightmare I don't even want to relive. Sorry. I mean, because you got to take the cap off of your canteen. Then you got to wipe the canteen down. Then you got to pull this little nozzle out of the front of the mask there. And then you got to wipe it down to make sure that it's decontaminated and there's nothing on there. And then you have to take and turn your canteen upside down, plug in this thing into it. And then you have to turn around and hunt inside the mask with your mouth and try and pull the nozzle, the sipping, the other end of it, into your mouth, and then try to drink the water out of that canteen. Now, mind you, that canteen is airtight at this point. So the more you suck on it, the harder it is to get that water to come through that straw and into your mouth. So imagine no air getting into this thing, and you're trying to suck, and you've gone through half of that canteen, and by this time, there's so much pressure in there, there's so much negative pressure, you can barely get anything out of it, and you're inside this suit in 140, 145 degree temperatures inside this suit, and you're sweating so bad. Literally, at one point, they made us wear it for a couple of days, and at one point, we got so sweaty that the mop suits were no longer effective because we sweat so much that it actually sweat through the mop suit and started dripping out on the outside. And when it dripped out on the outside, it dripped black. And when I say black, I mean charcoal black, because we were literally sweating the charcoal out of the suit. Now, I don't know what you know about these suits, but the charcoal is one of the main ingredients for binding up the chemical agents that get onto or into the suit that protects you. And at that point, the suits were useless. All right. So our higher command had to get onto our command, and that's how we ended up getting out of it. But and coming out of Mop 4. Anyway, Mop 4 is no joke. It's not comfortable. It's a nightmare. Nobody likes to be in it. But the thing is it works. It really does work. So I got, well, that's not basic training related, so I'll get into that when I get into some of my Desert Storm stories. But anyway, basic training, you go through the gas chamber, you do all these sort of things, and basically it's to teach you to trust in your mop gear. But it wasn't until I was out of basic training and in my 4th year of service where I went to the gas chamber and the NBC sergeant ended up throwing 4 tablets worth of the CS stuff onto the burner and filling the room so thick with the stuff that I truly began to appreciate what that mop level 4 could do for me. So I will leave the rest of that story and my appreciation for the mop gear for a later date when I go over some of the Desert Storm stuff. But for now, at this point, once you've gone through the gas chamber, that's like right there on the border of your red phase and your white phase. White phase being the second part of basic training. And if I remember correctly, it was literally day 1 or day 2 of white phase that we ended up doing the gas chamber. it's things change so much, and the order of things change sometimes because of availability, of personnel ability, that sort of thing. So I think it was like the first couple of days that we went into white phase that we ended up going into the gas chamber. And then after that, we went to the bayonet course, which we talked about last week. But it was right after this that I ended up having my case of bursitis and going on profile, to where I had 4 weeks of basic training where I could basically do nothing except show up and listen to what was being said and being taught and watch everybody else do the stuff. I'll tell you what, that drove me absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. It really did. But it was also during this time that we did our our first ruck marches, and I'll go over that a little bit later. But these ruck marches were designed to get us out to the rifle ranges for us to actually implement our basic rifle marksmanship, which we had done like a couple of weeks worth of classroom time and simulators working on our aim and our basic rifle marksmanship skills, i.e., your breathing, when you want to squeeze the trigger, squeezing the trigger, not pulling the trigger, how to aim, what the sight picture should look like when you're aiming, when to squeeze the trigger during your breathing cycles, not anticipating the round going off, but letting it surprise you, doing dime drills, which, if you've never heard of the dime drill before, is where you take a dime and you stick it on the end of the barrel and you squeeze the trigger and you try to hold your sight picture and your aim the entire time that you're squeezing that trigger, 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 trigger. And then once it clicks, there's enough of a click there that if you're not doing it correctly, that dime will fall off the barrel. So the idea was to train you on that steadiness so that you could squeeze that trigger and get that click without coming off of your aim. And the way that you would do that was by keeping the dime on the barrel. So for you guys out there that like to shoot rifles and stuff, try that sometime. No round in it, just empty magazines, and just go through and practice that. And you'll be surprised as to how much more accurate you can get doing that dime drill. But then we'd go out and we'd have 3 different positions that we'd have to shoot in. We'd have the kneeling. We'd have the oh Lord, the offhand position. I forget. I want to say they called it the standing position, but it had the standing position, which when I was going through ROTC they called it offhand position, and you had offhand supported, unsupported, which was basically being able to take the sling, wrap it around your forearm to help give you some support and stabilize your shooting a little bit. And then you had the kneeling position, and then you had the prone position, prone supported, prone unsupported. When you qualified, you would shoot prone supported and prone unsupported, and then kneeling position. And then that later changed to just prone supported and prone unsupported. And in order to qualify, you would shoot 40 rounds at pop-up targets that were at varying distances from 50 meters all the way out to 300 meters. Now, converting that into yards, you're talking about basically about 51, a little shy of 51 yards, all the way out to like 310, 320 yards. It's basically the length of 3 football fields with the end zone stacked end to end. And those were the targets that you would do, and they were pop-up targets that were life-size, so they were the actual size of an actual human being and silhouetted, so there was no actual identifying type features to it. It was just this little green silhouette thing that they would put up there. And you would have it at 50 meters, 100 meters, 150 meters, 200 meters, 250 meters, and 300 meters. And in order to qualify, you had to hit at least 26 out of 40 targets in order to qualify as a sharpshooter, or as a marksman. That's right, marksman. And then to qualify as sharpshooter, you would have to successfully hit at least 32 targets out of 40. Or no, Yeah, 32 targets out of 40 in order to get sharpshooter. And in order to qualify expert, you had to get 38 out of 40. In other words, you could only miss 2 targets and still get expert, which is no easy task, and not many people would pull that off. Those that did and were able to do it consistently usually end up getting the opportunity to go to sniper school, but it was usually those that were doing 40 out of 40 consistently that would end up getting to go to sniper school. But doing 40 out of 40 with an M16, A1, or A2 with just mechanical sights is not an easy task. I mean, you've got to be really good and on your game to be able to pull that off. Me personally, the best I ever did was qualified expert with 39 out of 40 on the rifle range. And then I qualified 40 out of 40 with the 9 millimeter consistently. But that's what we were using back then. I did have the occasion to be able to use the Colt 45 because one of my units actually had those instead of the 9 millimeters, and consistently with pistol, I would qualify expert on those. And once I got to the point where I was doing 38 out of 40, 39 out of 40 on the rifle, I was consistently getting expert on that, which is one of the reasons why you see that on in my shadow box when I show it. But when you're out at the ranges, you're not staying in the barracks anymore. You're actually staying out at a campsite. And you actually ruck march out to the campsite. You set up your tents, which is this what they called shelter halves. So you would team up with a battle buddy, in other words, somebody else, and then you would take and snap your two shelter halves together to create what would be known by civilians as a mountain tent. And it was just big enough for 2 people to sit in there or sleep in there. And one night when we were out there, and they warned us about this, they said, during the bivouac, the drill sergeant's going to come around and try and steal your weapon. So make sure you do something to try and secure your weapon, and don't let your drill sergeants get them. Because if they get them, you're going to be pushing up dicks. And we all knew what that meant. Push-ups, sitting on the wall, doing other kind of physical fitness type training, as a form of correction for allowing the drill sergeant to steal our weapon in the middle of the night when you're sound asleep and dead tired because you've been up from 4 a.m. until 10 p.m. doing rifle drills and rifle range stuff and things like that. So one night he comes along. I was absolutely dead tired. I mean, an artillery round could have gone off in our campsite and I probably wouldn't woke up. I was so tired. And sure enough, it was my turn. Drill sergeant came by, stole my rifle. Now the thing was in the process, I actually felt it, but I was so out of it, I thought I was dreaming and didn't think anything of it. Now mind you, I had the sling wrapped around my wrist and then attached to the rifle, and I also had my foot through the sling. So somehow he managed to move my arm and my foot to be able to get the rifle out. And I was in that half in, half out state thinking I was dreaming. And when I didn't feel it anymore, I was right back to sleep. Well, the next day, man, did I pay for it. Oh, did I pay for it. I did this exercise called sitting on the wall, where basically you pretend like you're sitting in a chair, only there's nothing underneath you, and your back is to the wall, and you have to keep your back to the wall while you hold your hands out in front of you like this, with the weapon coming right across your wrist. And you had to stay there with your legs at a 90-degree angle until he got tired. Not until you got tired, until he got tired. The drill sergeant got tired of watching you. Or it got to the point where you just couldn't hold your hands up anymore. And then when that happened, then you would do what was known as the inverted push-up. So what that basically means is you turn around, you put your hands on the ground, you put your feet up on the tree, and then you crawl up that tree until your feet are above your head and your hands are doing this. And you have to do a push-up while you're leaning against that tree like that. I must have gone through various different exercises like that in addition to regular sit-ups, push-ups, uh, side straddle hops, otherwise jumping jacks, 6-inch killers, the bicycle type thing where your feet are 6 inches off the ground and going like this, and stuff like that. And oh my God, oh, like 2.5 hours worth of that stuff. I thought I was going to die. So then that night he tried it again. Only this time I felt it. I recognized what it was. I grabbed my weapon and butt stroked down towards my feet. And what I didn't realize was I caught the drill sergeant like this, right across the face with the butt of the rifle, and knocked him out. He was still laying there the next morning when I got up. I and I was like, ooh, 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 I didn't do that, did I? I was playing an Urkel. Did I do that? And I turned around and I went to formation and I went on about my business, did my training, didn't say nothing, don't know nothing, whatever. So I felt bad for him too. And then that evening after the training was over, I got called in the company commander's office and I was like, oh Lord, here we go. I'm done for. I get to the talk because we were out of bivouac where the company commander was. And he calls me in there. And I come walking in there, and there's the drill sergeant. And the drill sergeant turns around and looks at me. And all I could see was the outline of the butt of my rifle on his face with the little X marks forming a diamond pattern on the inside. Now, it was fading out. It wasn't that obvious, right off the bat kind of thing. But if you look, you could see it. And I was like, uh-oh. I wanted to laugh, but I held it down because I didn't want to get in trouble. And the company commander was like, did you do this to your drill sergeant? I said, do what, sir? He said, don't play stupid with me. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, sir. And he said, that mark on your drill sergeant's face, did you butt stroke him in the middle of the night? And I said, sir, I really don't know. All I know is I felt like I was dreaming someone was taking my rifle, and I grabbed my rifle, did a butt stroke, and went back to sleep, and I thought it was a dream. I really thought it was a dream. You know, I wasn't really aware of what was happening at the time, but I did the butt stroke, went back to sleep, and nothing happened after that, so I really don't know what happened. And the company commander just started cracking up laughing, just right in front of the drill sergeant, in front of me. And it was everything I could do to keep from laughing myself. And I'm sitting there just squashing the laughter, going, and so he ends up dismissing me. And on my way out, I hear the company commander tell the drill sergeant, I guess that'll teach you to try and steal his weapon twice in a row, huh? And that's when I heard him say, because we can't hold a soldier accountable for anything that they do within the first 30 seconds of waking up, according to Uniform Military Code of Justice. So, there wasn't anything they could do about it. He cracked a joke. I learned something new, and we went on with things. So as we get into blue phase, what's the next photo up there? Ah, the pugil sticks. Yeah, we get into blue phase, and then it's the pugil sticks. Now, I know you guys have seen this, and I tell you what, it is a blast. You've gone through, I don't know, like 8 weeks at this point worth of what you feel is like pure hell of the drill sergeants barking at you the whole time. Now, here the whole goal is basically to get the upper hand and basically win this fight like you're using your rifle to fight. Only this is a lot safer. It's got padded sticks, in helmets and stuff, and bodyguards just to keep you from really getting hurt. And you get in there and you just slug it out with these guys. And you're not allowed to punch them. You're not allowed to do anything like that. In order to hit your opponent, you have to use the pugil sticks. It's basically they teach you how to do combat with a rifle. And it was so much fun. So much fun. Especially when you manage to get a nice clean hit right across the side of your opponent's face and knock him to the ground. Yours is done. You're done. You're out of there. He has to go back through it again because he lost. And nobody back then, for whatever reason, nobody wanted to go against me. I don't know what it was, and and the drill sergeants would always have to point to somebody and tell them to get in there with me to do it. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun. Oh my God, that's one of the things that, honestly, I wish if I could go back, I would do that again in a heartbeat. That was so much fun. All right, let's go to the next one because I want to try and get through this before it's too late. Okay, the ruck marches. Remember I told you that we would ruck out to the bivouacs. Well, in blue phase, right before graduation, you end up having to do a 12-mile ruck march, which is all your combat gear, fully loaded out, ammunition, everything, no round loaded in your weapon, of course. But, you got an empty magazine in your weapon, and you're carrying everything on your LBV, and you're wearing a rucksack, which they weigh to make sure it weighs 60 pounds. So then you take off and you do this ruck march, and you are force marching it. I mean, you are hoofing it. I mean, you are walking as fast as you can walk, and you're doing this for 12 miles. The goal is to be able to do 12 miles in 3 hours. But our drill sergeants, yeah, our drill sergeants decided it wasn't a 12-mile ruck march we needed to do. It was a 15-mile ruck march that we needed to do. So we ended up doing a roundabout way, and supposedly, we took a wrong turn. Sorry about that, guys. We need to brush up on our land navigation. And we're like, yeah, right. Come to find out in the end, we were actually ahead of schedule, and we were going to arrive at the location that we were supposed to be at like an hour and a half before we were supposed to be there. So rather than let that happen, they took us 3 more miles out of the way. And we ended up getting there on time. And that's how fast we were moving. And part of the reason for that was because they let this guy, Drill Sergeant Pendergraft, lead the ruck march. Now, I say his name like that because this dude, oh my God. He looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger and was 6'7". He was a friggin' basketball player. All right. Now, when I step out on a ruck march, I have a good 3 to 3.5 foot span between the heel of my back foot and the toe of my front foot. And that's stepping out. And that's a bigger step than what a lot of people can do. This man made me look like a midget. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, he made me look, shorter than a hobbit. All right. 6'7". I'm 6'2", and he made me look like a kid. Right? And when he stepped out, he had a good 4 to 4.5 foot span between his feet. So for every 2 steps I was taking at my max, he was taking 1 step. I was having to run to keep up with this joker. All right? And we're doing 15 miles like this. And I don't know if you've ever been to Fort Dix, New Jersey, but the back 40 of Fort Dix, New Jersey is nothing but soft sand. And when I say soft sand, I'm talking about the kind of sand that you sink in. And when I say you sink in it, when you take a step, your foot doesn't stop until half of your shin is under the sand. And we're having to step out like this. And we're marching like this with 60 pounds of weight on our backs, carrying an additional 10 to 13 pounds of LBV, flak vest, weapon, all that kind of stuff. Oh, I wanted to smack that man. I will never forget Drill Sergeant Pendergraft because of that road march. And then we get out there, and we get introduced to this thing called the Paragon Trail. You can go ahead and take that down. How much time do we have left, by the way? Okay, good. We got just enough time for me to go over the Paragon Trail. The Paragon Trail is very similar to the Confidence course, only there's a big difference between this and the Confidence course. And I don't know if you have that picture up there, but if you would, put the picture of the Confidence Tower up there. Yeah, that one. This one, in order to get to the top, you have to work as a team. Because as you can see, those bottom rungs got a nice little 6-foot span between them. And you have to literally pick yourself up and swing up onto the next level. And the only way that you're going to do that is if you have help from teammates. Now, mind you, once you get to the top of this thing, you're 30 feet off the ground, and if any one person slips or their grip slips and you slip off and you aren't able to catch yourself and put your feet on the next on the next level below you that you're trying to come off of and go up, you're falling that whole distance to the ground. So, I mean, this is developing your confidence in your teammates. It's developing teamwork. It's making you understand that the person next to you has your life in their hands, and at the same time, when you're in their position, you have their life in your hands. So you really have to trust people in order to pull this off. And you have to go up that way, and you have to come down that way. Now, you can go ahead and take that down. The Paragon Trail is a little bit different, because the Paragon Trail is designed so that you put into use everything that you learn during training while doing this course. So you're doing first aid, you're doing fireman carries, you're doing grenade tosses, you're doing litter carries, you're doing NBC stuff, you're doing obstacle course type stuff. And then you get to this one point where you look up and it basically looks like a battlefield. Okay, and you've got some towers in there where the drill sergeants are standing and whatnot. Pardon me. And there's these barbed wire obstacle that's laid out that's only like, so high. It's just high, tall enough that you could lay down on the ground face down and slide up underneath it. And the whole point of this is basically to show you what you've learned and show you that you can survive on a battlefield if you use your training. Now, while you're climbing underneath these barbed wire obstacles, they're tossing grenade simulators out there, and they're going off, 5, 10, 15 feet away from you. So you're getting this loud boom in your ears. And then they're also throwing off artillery simulators. They're even louder than the grenades. And then at the same time, they're also sitting up there in the towers with live ammunition in the M16 shooting at the top of the berm behind you. So you got live rounds flying over your head. And what they're telling you is that those live rounds are only about 5 feet over your head, so you need to keep your head down. In reality, they're shooting them at the top of the berm, which is like, 15 feet over your head. Nevertheless, you're sitting there low crawling with your weapon, your LBV, Kevlar, all that stuff through sand for like 50 yards underneath all this barbed wire until you get to the end. By the time you're done, that sand has worked its way through the sleeves of your shirt and just torn your elbows up and made them raw. I mean, raw flesh. Just, it's awful. But again, the whole point is to teach you that if you use your skills on the battlefield, you can and most likely will survive if you do and rely on your training. However, as you get further into your career, you start finding out that that's not necessarily true, that no matter how well you follow your training, there's always the chance that you could end up eating a bullet or eating some shrapnel from artillery or something else to that effect. There's no 100% guarantee that you're going to survive the battlefield, and you just have to deal with that. But at the same time, you also have to do your training in order to accomplish your mission. And that's why during basic training, there's such a high stress level, and why they're on you so hard, and why they harp on attention to detail. There's a lot of reasons for that. But nevertheless, I'm out of time. Well, we've got 2 minutes left. Is there anybody actually watching live? No? Okay. In that case, then we're not going to open it up for questions or anything like that. But go ahead and put the shadow box up there for me. just so people can see, when you finish basic training at the end of it and you graduate and you have that diploma in your hand, you also get a ribbon. Now, if you look on my shadow box here and look on the second row to the far right, there's a ribbon there that kind of looks like a rainbow. It has red at the edges and blue in the center with orange, yellow, green, and then the blue going from the outside inward. That's known as the Army Service Ribbon, the ASM. When you complete basic training, you get that. It's known as the Everybody Ribbon, but it just shows that you've completed basic training. So with that said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. So we will see you next week. Next week, I'll go over some of my stories and talk to you a little bit about what it was like going through Advanced Individual Training, otherwise known as AIT, in which my first time through, I was a chaplain's assistant, and we will go over some of that stuff and the things that I learned there and what I was trained to do as a chaplain's assistant. So tune in next week and we will go over all that stuff. And it's also during this time, well, if I can get to it next week, which I'm not sure I will, but if not, then the following week I'll start talking about my Desert Storm experience, because I went to Desert Storm as a chaplain's assistant with a medical unit, which is kind of ironic because later on in life I ended up becoming a medic, and I will explain to you how that happened and why that happened in later episodes. But tune in next week. You'll find out what it's like to be a chaplain's assistant in the United States Army and how difficult of a job that actually is and how dangerous it can be. So, without further ado, thank you very much. Make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to hit that bell so you get notified every time we have a new episode that comes up. So, with that, have a good night, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week.